There is a moment inside every betrayal where the truth becomes too heavy for the mind to carry. A moment where a woman knows she crossed a line she once believed she never would. But instead of collapsing under guilt, she begins quietly reshaping her reality so she can live with what she just did. This is the part most men never see, the mental rewiring that happens long before she confesses, long before you notice anything is wrong, long before the truth ever reaches the surface. A woman rarely cheats while her mind is clear. She cheats after her emotions have been twisting silently for months or years. She cheats after she has convinced herself of a story that protects her from seeing herself as disloyal. And once that internal narrative is built, it becomes the shield she hides behind. Not because she wants to hurt you, but because she cannot face the version of herself who just destroyed something she once swore to protect. The first way she justifies cheating is by redefining responsibility. She tells herself the relationship was already broken. She tells herself she was neglected, misunderstood, emotionally starved. She repeats this story until it feels true. And even if there was love, even if there was effort, she convinces herself that her unhappiness came from you, not from her own emotional drift. This narrative becomes the ground she stands on, even when the truth is more complicated. The mind does not like contradictions, so when she cheats, she resolves the contradiction by rewriting the past. She adjusts the memories. She changes the tone of old arguments. She turns moments of simple mistakes into signs of emotional abandonment. And once the past has been rewritten, the betrayal feels less like betrayal and more like escape. Another powerful justification comes from emotional comparison. When another man enters her life offering attention or validation, her mind begins comparing you to him, not realistically, but emotionally. She exaggerates his strengths because they make her feel alive. She exaggerates your flaws because they help her rationalize her choices. These comparisons are not fair. They are not balanced. They are not logical. They are emotional coping mechanisms. The new connection becomes a symbol of everything she felt she was missing. The old relationship becomes a symbol of everything she felt trapped in. And once her mind makes that emotional contrast, the betrayal becomes easier to justify. Some women justify cheating by minimizing the act itself. She tells herself it wasn't serious. She tells herself it didn't mean anything. She tells herself it was a moment of weakness, a temporary mistake, something small compared to the pain she endured. This minimizes the moral weight of the betrayal, shrinking it down so her conscience can carry it. The mind is skilled at shrinking guilt until it becomes bearable. She may even tell herself it just happened, as if she had no control. But cheating never just happens. There are thoughts, opportunities, choices, and at each step, she walked closer to the line. Yet the phrase, "it just happened," gives her emotional distance from her own decision. There is also the justification born from emotional loneliness. When she feels empty, disconnected, or ignored, her mind uses loneliness as permission. She convinces herself she deserved affection, deserved attention, deserved to feel wanted again. Loneliness becomes the emotional excuse that softens her guilt. And because emotional pain feels real, she treats it like a moral pass that allowed her to seek comfort elsewhere. This doesn't absolve the act, but in her mind it explains it. And when someone believes their pain justifies their behavior, guilt becomes quiet. Another justification comes from emotional displacement. Instead of facing her own wrongdoing, she shifts the blame onto you. She becomes more critical, more irritated, more distant. She points out flaws that never mattered before. She turns small disagreements into reasons for betrayal. She convinces herself that your shortcomings gave her no choice. This displacement protects her self-image while redirecting the emotional burden onto you. A cheating woman rarely admits to herself, "I hurt him." Instead, she thinks, "He hurt me first." Even if you didn't, even if the story is twisted. Her mind needs a villain, and she cannot afford it to be herself. So she paints the narrative in a way that keeps her from drowning in guilt. Another layer of justification comes through emotional escape. Cheating becomes the outlet she uses to feel alive, desired, connected, or free. The affair becomes the place where she hides from stress, routine, or dissatisfaction. And because the escape feels good, her mind protects the source of that feeling rather than condemning it. She tells herself she needed release, needed a moment of joy, needed a break from pain. And once the affair becomes a form of emotional relief, she sees it as a coping mechanism rather than a betrayal. There is also the justification that comes from emotional fantasy. She doesn't cheat with the man. She cheats with the version of herself she becomes in his presence. The fantasy version of her feels lighter, happier, more desired, more powerful. She becomes addicted to the feeling of being wanted. And once she ties her emotional identity to the fantasy, the guilt of cheating becomes drowned out by the comfort of who she feels she is when she's with him. Fantasy is powerful because it blinds her to consequences. She becomes intoxicated with the illusion of emotional freedom, and guilt cannot compete with that illusion. Another deep justification comes from internal pain she has not healed. Old wounds, previous betrayals, long-standing insecurities, all these become emotional ammunition her mind uses to excuse her actions. She tells herself she was never truly loved. She tells herself she always settled. She tells herself she deserved more. Even if these stories are not fully true, they become the emotional scaffolding she clings to while justifying her betrayal. The mind does not seek truth during emotional crisis. It seeks safety. And these stories create emotional shelter. Some women justify cheating through compartmentalization. They split their emotional life into two separate worlds, the world with you and the world with him. These worlds never touch. She behaves differently in each. She feels different in each. She thinks different in each. And by keeping the compartments separate, she avoids feeling the full moral impact of her actions. She convinces herself that what happens in one world does not affect the other. This is not moral clarity. It is psychological survival. It allows her to function without drowning in guilt. It allows her to lie without feeling like she is lying. It allows her to betray without confronting the truth. Another justification comes from emotional entitlement. She believes she sacrificed for too long. She believes she carried too much weight. She believes she deserves to put her own needs first. Entitlement is the coldest justification because it removes empathy. It removes accountability. It removes the emotional connection that guilt needs to exist. Once entitlement takes over, she sees the betrayal as something she earned, rather than something she should feel remorse for. One of the most painful justifications comes from rewriting who you are. She begins telling herself a new story about your character. She exaggerates your flaws. She rewrites your intentions. She misinterprets your behavior. She turns you into someone who deserves betrayal. Not because it's true, but because it makes her actions emotionally tolerable. This rewriting is not about accuracy. It is about protecting her self-image. By making you the problem, she frees herself from the emotional punishment of guilt. Finally, the deepest justification comes from emotional numbness. Some women shut down internally long before they cheat. They go through the motions but feel nothing. They stay physically present but emotionally distant. And when she feels nothing, the betrayal feels like nothing. Not because she doesn't understand the moral weight, but because she has lost emotional access to the part of her that once cared deeply. Emotional numbness is not strength. It is exhaustion. It is shutdown. It is the mind protecting itself from pain it never processed. And when someone is numb, guilt cannot breathe. These justifications do not make the betrayal right. They do not excuse the decisions. They do not erase the damage. But they explain the psychology behind how someone can cross such a painful line and still look you in the eyes as if nothing happened. Cheating does not begin with an action. It begins with a story she tells herself. A story she repeats until it becomes her emotional truth. And once that internal story is strong enough, guilt becomes quiet. This is why the betrayal feels so cold. This is why her reactions feel distant. This is why her remorse feels absent. Her mind has already rewritten the world in a way that protects her from seeing herself clearly. And that is the deepest truth. A woman does not justify cheating to escape you. She justifies cheating to escape herself.